Microphone muted.
Good evening and welcome to Overtime. Let me actually check on the audio at this point. I just get a feedback on the audio that the audio is in fact heading out. It should be, but the register here says it's not. I'm going to assume that the audio is going out until I hear otherwise. Thank you for joining us. This is a big enough story that we have decided to broadcast it on both channels, and let me just quickly check. All right, we've got that. So, all right. Yeah. So thank you for joining us. This is going to be both on In Time and Overtime simultaneously. The Washington Post, in conjunction with 16 media partners, is reporting that Pegasus, a military-grade spyware licensed by an Israeli firm for government use in the use of tracking down terrorists and criminals, has been deployed in at least 37 cases, or against 37 smartphones belonging to journalists, business executives, and human rights advocates, including but not limited to reporters from the Associated Press, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, the Financial Times, Le Monde, and CNN and Al Jazeera. Pegasus is engineered explicitly to evade the defenses of an iPhone and an Android device and leaves very few traces of its presence. It can attack phones without warning and can give control of the phone. It can log camera and keystrokes. It can log the microphone and camera without any need for the user to click to activate it. It doesn't necessarily require someone to, it can be employed by click this, you've won secret, whatever. But it doesn't need that. It can actually hijack a phone without any of those things. Claudio Guarnieri from Amnesty International Security Lab has said, quote, "There is nothing from an encryption standpoint to protect against this." If it's been targeting journalists, aid workers, government officials, this would constitute a human rights violation and would make it extraordinarily difficult for anybody to do just about anything. Imagine if you are a politician and your phone maybe is being recorded by this. If you are a human rights worker in a hostile country and that government may be tracking you, it would seem to suggest also that NSO, the company that manufactures this software, who has said that it is explicitly for the use of counterterrorism and crime prevention, and who have said that they actually monitor their clients who are limited to vetted government agencies, have failed to maintain this charter. Much more than that. At this point, the Washington hold on a sec. The Washington Post is also reporting that in addition to these 37 phones, which they have confirmed have had this software deployed against them, they claim that there is a list of over 50,000 phones, any number of which they believe may have been hacked or spied on. Now, the numbers on this list are all unattributed, but the reporters were able to identify more than 1,000 people in 50 countries who were on this list, including Arab royal family members, business executives, human rights advocates, and nearly 200 journalists and more than 600 politicians. A number of heads of states and prime ministers were also on the list. In Mexico alone, there were 15,000 numbers on this list, including those of politicians, union representatives, journalists, and government critics. Hundreds of these journalists are in India. They are opposition politicians, government officials, and other members of government and civilians. On this list were two women who were the closest people to Washington Post columnists you'll have to forgive me, Khashoggi, who was in the Saudi embassy when he was ambushed and hacked to death by members of, if I recall, it was the royal house of Saud. Now, two of the women, including his wife, that were closest to him, had their phones hacked by this program. His wife, as early as 8 months before his killing. Two of the Turkish investigators charged with investigating his death also had their phones compromised by this program. If this is accurate, this would suggest that, at a minimum, hostile countries, possibly Saudi Arabia, other countries, somehow have access to this software and have been using it to track enemies, using it to track dissidents. Who knows? Celicio Pinedilla, freelance reporter in Mexico, had his number appear on this list twice. A month after the second listing, he was at a car wash waiting for his car to come out when he was gunned down and killed. This is nasty software, like eloquently nasty, said Timothy Summers, director of IT at Arizona State University and a former cybersecurity engineer with U.S. intelligence. One could spy on almost the entire world population. There's not anything wrong with building technology that allows you to collect data. It's necessary sometimes, but humanity is not at a place where we can have that much power accessible to just anybody. The NSO Group, the makers of Pegasus software, says that it only sells this software to vetted governments and has never operated the software themselves. They have denied that the Israeli government monitors their clients or their clients' use of the software. They have also denied that their software was used in any way to assist in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, including but not limited to hacking his phone, the phones of any of those around him, listening, monitoring, and tracking or collecting any information, either again on him or any of those around him. They also say that their software cannot be used to conduct surveillance within the United States, and in fact, none of their technology would enable anyone to access United States phone numbers. They say that this is technologically impossible and that all of these claims are baseless. They have added that the list of 50,000 phone numbers cannot possibly be accurate. It is far too large and must come from misleading or misinterpreted information. They also state that their software is used exclusively to catch terrorists, child pornographers, sex slavery and sex trafficking rings, and that it is not used in any illegal fashion. They have said that, well, they have noted, in fact, that they cannot confirm or deny that these numbers have been targeted by the software or comes from a list of people who have had their phones targeted by this software. They said they cannot do this because they do not have access to their customer data or how their customers actually use Pegasus. They have reiterated that they do not use the technology themselves and that they sell only to vetted government's agencies. They have, however, admitted that they have terminated 2 contracts over allegations that the software was used for human rights violations over the last year. I'm sorry, I'm not sure whether that was last year or 2 years. Sorry, that got blotted out there. So they terminated 2 contracts recently over allegations of human rights abuses. They have not named the governments or agencies involved. Most authorities and governments that have a high population of people whose numbers were on this list have denied any involvement and or denied that any of these phone numbers are compromised. Rwanda's foreign affairs minister denies that they have Pegasus or that they have ever been using it on their citizens or otherwise. Morocco has denied it and said that they have already investigated these allegations and found them to be baseless and categorically reject them. The office of the Hungarian Prime Minister has stated that, in fact, state bodies do use covert instruments to monitor governmental and non-governmental institutions. However, they do so legally, and while they do not confirm or deny use of the Pegasus software, they have denied any surveillance on journalists or politicians. Mexico, however, acknowledges that they have used Pegasus in the past. They acquired Pegasus in 2014. Let's say they stopped using it when the license expired in 2017. Amnesty International, which conducted the forensic analysis and discovered the phones that have in fact been compromised by Pegasus, developed a method for identifying the use of the Pegasus software and had this method independently reviewed. The Citizens Lab, a University of Toronto research group which specializes in the Pegasus software, conducted their own assessment of the techniques and found that their methods were sound and valid. They also conducted their own independent research on the data and on the numbers and phones that they had, which was a smaller set of the entire 37. I believe it was 5. Reached the same key findings as Amnesty International. So what we have at this point is, and I'll go over this again. This was a considerable amount of information, and the 50,000 phone numbers thing needs some digesting. What we have is the Washington Post coming out today, not that long ago, a few hours ago, with a story that what appears to be the most powerful hacking tool in history, made by, NSO, a Israeli cybersecurity firm, appears to be in the hands of people who are using it clandestinely. Now, they have this software. They have licensed it to a number of governments and agencies that represent those governments. They do not say who they have licensed it to. However, purportedly, license have to go through. If I remember correctly, it's the Israeli defense minister. It's at least one member of the Israeli government has to sign off. A high-ranking member of the Israeli government has to sign off on who gets licensed it. We don't know how it works. We don't know how the licensing works. We don't know what oversight there is. They have said that they will never give it to anything but a vetted government agency. Presumably, this would be in general industrialized nations, but it does appear as if even some of the countries hostile to Israel appears to have it. Somebody, at least on their behalf, has used it on enemies of these countries. So the questions at this point are, how many people have this software and who's got it? Presumably the United States has it. They have claimed that the United States infrastructure is immune to this. I have absolutely no idea how that could be technically possible. Or somebody with more knowledge of this than I would have to answer that question. Apparently a number of the phones were American phone numbers, and they have used this to say, well, this obviously then could not be a list of phone numbers compromised by Pegasus because you couldn't have an American phone number on there. That makes no sense to me. It also seems to me, at least, that they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. We monitor our clients and we ensure that there are no human rights violations, but we have no idea what our clients are doing and aren't responsible. At any rate, it's unclear where this list of 50,000 came from. There have been some suggestions that there are markers in the network, in cell networks, and presumably that a number of the numbers came from that. The Washington Post really did not make clear where this list came from, and it seems to me that they're not even entirely sure. The list purportedly is a list of people who have been targeted by this software, but they haven't been able to verify it. Every one of the 37 numbers that they have verified was on that list as we understand it at present. Now, whether or not they simply sampled as many numbers as they could, got out 37, they had been hacked, I don't know. Obviously, that's important, and my assumption is we're going to get more details as time passes. But it is clear that this list isn't random people. This list has meaning. This list is in general journalists. It is in the various countries where the numbers stem from. Again, now they've only identified about 1,000 of these numbers. They've been able to identify the countries, but they haven't been able to identify who these numbers are. They've identified about 1,000 of this 50,000. And so far, the vast majority that appears to be dissidents, reporters, politicians. These aren't random people on the street. And again, every one of the 37 that were targeted by this software are on that list. So the implication, though they have not said it, the implication is that that list is somehow obtained, a list of either everybody this software has ever been used on, which is possible if it's a leak from the company that manufactures it, and if they in fact do monitor it. Now, they've told their clients they don't. They've told the public they don't. But they have a licensing system. Mexico says they had a license, and then they did not renew that license. Now, if that license is to be enforced, there has to be some communication between the software and the servers owned by the manufacturer, or the people who manufacture the NSO. So whether or not there is a record of everybody that this thing has ever been used, we don't know. So I am sorry to say that there's more gray areas in this than not, but at present, this appears to be a staggering story. We know this software is out there. Apparently, there is no way to stop it. The iPhone, either on the iOS or on the hardware, has no way of stopping it, neither does Android. It can target any phone. We know for a fact it has been licensed to a number of governments and government agencies, and at this point, we know it's been abused by somebody, because a number of these people should not have had it. There's no legit reason that Khashoggi should have been targeted. There's no legit reason that the people investigating Khashoggi's death should have been targeted. The only one with an interest either in targeting Khashoggi or his death, or the people investigating his death, or the people around him, including his wife, the only people interested in doing that I can imagine would be Saudi Arabia. So obviously that's concerning, and we don't at this point. Most governments have denied it, with the exception of Mexico, and they simply say, well, we don't use it anymore. So I honestly don't know what else I can tell you. I'm gonna check out some comments in the live chat, and then I think we'll do one more quick rundown on it, and then I think we're probably done. If anybody wants to, we're going to be covering this, and we're going to keep up with it in the live chat. Somebody mentioned Trump. The U.S. almost certainly has a copy of it. We helped Israel launch we helped them obtain nuclear weapons. I think they would probably be very amicable to giving it to us, and they are an ally. So no doubt we have it. Whether or not Trump has used or misused it, don't know. So obviously we'll be looking forward to more insight on that. Again, it would constitute a human rights violation for any number of reasons, and a huge security problem. If you're a journalist and if you're working in a war zone and your phone can be hacked to give away your position, it appears, well, we don't know. Cecilio Penadilla was a freelance reporter in Mexico, and he was gunned down at a car wash a month after his phone was penetrated by this software. Let me rephrase that. A month after his name appeared on this list. So let me be a little more precise there. If this list is a list of people who were targeted by this software, which there's definitely some evidence to suggest, it hasn't been proven, but it's a suspicious list, and we know that these people are on it. So, okay, then the question is, who penetrated his phone and what they do with that information? It seems to me a significant amount of circumstantial evidence that the Saudi government penetrated the phone of the family and friends of Khashoggi, and that would probably help them in locating him. So, I don't. It doesn't prove what this list is, but it demonstrates, I think, that there is absolutely some people who are using this information uh, uh, maliciously, and it certainly could be used in assassinations, smear campaigns. If you know what your all the dirty laundry of your opponent in a political campaign. I mean, this is the kind of software that topples governments. If your government's using it, if you're the president of the United States or any country, and you decide that you're going to listen in on all the phone calls of all your opponents, you will find something. You will find something. Nobody's life is completely above scrutiny. So it's extraordinarily dangerous software. It is being misused at a minimum 37 cases, and what appears to be circumstantial evidence that it at least contributed to the assassination of Khashoggi. At least it was attempted to be employed that way. People are killed in Mexico. Reporters are killed in Mexico. Mexico's the most dangerous place on the planet to be a reporter. So the fact that Pereira was assassinated shortly after his name was on this list could very easily be a coincidence. A lot of things probably happen before people are killed, but it's worth noting and it's worth keeping an eye on. So we're going to keep an eye on it. We're going to talk more about it on the Discord. Anyone who wants to join our Discord, it is presumably the correct link in both channels. And so, like I said, I'm going to go through the terrorism is such a broad idea that anything can constitute it. That is a problem. And I've actually personally been thinking about that problem for any number of reasons. Part of it's a language problem, but it's actually a bit more of an an ontological issue. Well, no, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. I think John Stuart Mill is credited with having created a huge swath of our legal system, and invented the idea of property as we understand it, and that notion actually was very detrimental to the Native Americans. You can actually, John Stuart Mill was good, did not intend to have that happen. Nonetheless, he also invented something called the harm principle. And the idea was that you should make something illegal only if it harms another individual. Well, today, harm is watered down to mean music that's played too loudly, or people who tell me ideas that I find discomforting when I'm in a public square and they're exercising their right to free speech. So, if terrorism is the targeting of civilians to put forth or to advance usually an extremist political agenda. But you can frame that any number of ways. If you get to define the language, if you get to define civilian, if you get to define extremist, and if you get to define agenda. So, yeah, I think that's why the whole idea of checks and balances is so important. It's this appears to me to be one of the more dangerous pieces of software probably on the planet. I can imagine, something that can hack a nuclear reactor is probably slightly more dangerous, but this is still up there. So let's see. Why do I have the feeling that the whistleblower who leaked this information will end up with 2 self-inflicted gunshot wounds? Yeah, a very bad joke entered my mind, which is, well, he'd better not use his cell phone. Yeah. My doorknob had my phone number is 555. Come get me. Yeah. Well, there's any number of ways you could engineer a block for U.S. phones on the hardware or software. However, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know much about the mechanics of it. The article did speak about the mechanics, and again, this was the Washington Post. I strongly recommend. In fact, I should probably put a link to it. Anybody who wants to go see that should read it. They do discuss a bit about how it works. The software's been around for a little bit, and it's been kind of in the public consciousness for a little bit. And there are, to the best of my understanding, some articles on roughly how it works and what it does. I'm not an expert. I don't know, but it does seem to the notion that it's impossible for it to work on U.S. phones, which was the claim, if I understood it correctly, the claim made by NSO, was that it's impossible for it to work on U.S. phones. They may have put a block, or they may have taught America how to block it on our phones, which is convenient. But impossible is an awfully high bar. Michael, thanks for coming by. It was good to see you, and we appreciate seeing you. So, yeah, I find the argument that it can't work on U.S. phones to be ludicrous. It may be that there's a block on it, so it doesn't work on U.S. phones. Those blocks can be removed. It may be that the U.S. has some idea of how it works, and we've seen the source code and built in something into our infrastructure to block it. I find that hard to believe when you get to that level of conspiracy. Usually you'd have heard of it by now. Not always, but usually. And certainly since this was designed to hack an iPhone and hack the phones are just as vulnerable. So it's got to be the network that somehow would protect us. And how you're going to build a network when the way the U.S. networks work is they're privatized. They're owned by a variety of companies, and the lines are maintained by local governments. So, well, are they still maintained by? I don't know. That system's changed a lot. Who the hell knows? Usually, I don't even know anymore. But at any rate, yeah, the towers are usually bought by someone and they're licensed out. It's complicated, but it's all private firms and or local governments. It's not, I don't know how you build into the infrastructure the ability to repel this kind of thing. So presumably it's there. I don't know. Again, to me at least, this is where we get into the opinion part of the show. They're talking out of both sides of their mouths. Well, they said there was absolutely no way their software was used in the targeting of Jamal Khashoggi. It just wasn't. That's the claim. None of his family had it used against them. He didn't have it used against him. None of the investigators had it used against them. Not possible. Okay, that's their claim. The claim of the Washington Post is, yep, it was used against them. Now, whether or not this led to intel that eventually led to his assassination or not, I don't know, but presumably that was the intent, and it was used against him. It was used, according to the Washington Post. So somebody's wrong and or lying. But the only thing I can think about with the NSO, Jesus, I keep forgetting is that they also say that they don't monitor their clients. Well, if they don't monitor their clients, how can they know that it wasn't used against them? There's no way to know that. They can be pretty sure. If they didn't give it to the Saudis, if they didn't give it to any country that has a history of going around assassinating reporters. But then again, the U.S. has a history of some pretty vile shit when you get down to it. We don't always follow the rules either, you know. Anyone hear of Tuskegee? We're more than happy, and heck, we stole Texas. Let's just get that out of the way. And then a genocide and a few, let's Abu Ghraib. Sorry, it's just you open up the floodgate. Mistakes have been made. So if we have the software, you can't guarantee that we haven't misused it. And we just had a president who, oh dear Lord, I mean, he'd use it on Melania if he could. Okay, I mean, really. So be listening into Melania would be the closest thing he's had to a conversation with her in his entire friggin' marriage. At any rate, so the fact that they can make both the claims simultaneously to me is highly suspect, and it suggests to me that and they've also now they booted 2 firms for violation of human rights. Okay, if they did that, then they've got some way of knowing, or at least suspecting it. So, and if those firms violated the human rights, then other clients could be doing it as well. So, how could they possibly guarantee that this didn't happen? I don't know. But it strikes me as not. I have issues, but that's me, and I should quit opining quite so much on it. Anyways, that's the report. To reiterate, what we have at this point is the Washington Post has come out with a list of 50,000 people that they seem to suggest have been targeted by the software Pegasus, which is a spy tool. It's a spyware designed to hack any phone, Android, iPhone. Every phone is vulnerable to it. And to grab control of it, be able to record it, track keystrokes, use the camera, use the mic, yada, yada, yada. There is no direct evidence that this 50,000 list has been compromised, but the list is an interesting one. And there is evidence that at least 37 names on the list have been targeted or compromised, and that's been confirmed independently both by Amnesty International and what is it? The lab. I've forgotten the name of the lab that verified it off of them, but Citizens Lab in the University of Toronto. So we know that at least 37 people have been compromised on that list, and we know that a number of people are involved with the assassination of the Washington Post columnist Khashoggi were also compromised by this. That includes his wife and at least one other woman who was close to him, and it includes 2 of the investigators who were investigating his murder were targeted by this software. Now, if this software is to be used exclusively for counterterrorism and to fight crime, as this company suggests, there seems to be no reason that the investigators of his death would have been compromised, and there seems to be no reason why his wife would have been. If, however, you want to kill him, this software might be kind of useful to you. So this strikes me as a staggering claim and worthy of broadcasting. So we did put it on both channels, a bit of an exception. We have moved Overtime. Overtime is now on its own channel. And if you're watching on In Time, I hope you will join us on Overtime and subscribe. And we're not going to make a habit of going on both channels. But this is one now. How big this gets over the next couple of days is going to be interesting. We're going to follow it. It's possible it's not going to get a heck of a lot of traction. When Woodward and Bernstein first did Watergate, nobody was listening and nobody cared. Nobody cared what these people were saying. And they're saying, guys, we've noticed a few things. And they did article after article and after article, and other newspapers didn't pick it up, and nobody followed it until all of a sudden. So I'm going to be very curious to see where this goes, but this was definitely worthy, I think, of some time tonight. So thank you all for joining us. Again, we'll be continuing it in the Discord. Thank you to all the mods and everyone who showed